I'm big.
And I'm going to forget my line because, well, I'm fucking surly today. Oh, sorry. That's a swear word in the first 60 seconds.
Yeah, apparently we get screened out by an algorithm if we curse in the first 60 seconds.
Cut.
I think we just go.
I think
we're just ready to go. And this is what people get if this is the first episode they've seen, us fucking up and cursing in the first 60 seconds.
Welcome to how it's going to progress.
The best example they're going to get.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm big.
I know I'm surly, and
yes,
neither of us are professionals.
No.
Now, while you're actually here, and just quickly give this video a like, a share to help us spread some circulation of the video and whatnot.
And you know how to do that, and we feel real greasy.
No, I'm gonna be asking this every single time because I saw Russell Brand is shamelessly plugging himself, and so does Joe Rogan. So I mean, if that's
Russell Brand,
yeah.
Or is there a dude named Russell Brown?
Brand. I'm bad with names. Really bad with names.
That'd be pretty amazing if there was some random dude named Russell Brown I hadn't heard of who was some guru.
Yeah, there you go. Right. Well, so
speaking of Russell Brand, look at me. I'm kind of fat Russell Brand. I've got the schnoz. I do need a tan instead of just like cigarette-induced rosacea.
So him and Joe Rogan are like teaming up. It's like the alt-right.
Are they?
Kind of. They respect each other. It was kind of interesting to watch.
Rogan's not alt-right.
No, he's not. But I mean, he was very embraced by the alt-right.
It's call interesting. Rogan the meathead messiah.
That's kind of rude.
Why?
He's not a meathead.
He's totally a meathead. He like exercises and pumps. His second album, I got in trouble for playing his second, I think it was his second comedy album, when I ran the college radio station at the University of Iowa, because he has a bit in it where he basically verbally simulates sex with a man and equates it to
hilarious
lifting weights. Like the sounds men make when they lift weights are the same as the sounds men would make if they were having sex.
He's probably not wrong.
Well, it was a pretty funny bit. I thought it was funny. I played it. It was not problematic at that time because obviously I'm old, if you can't tell by the gray hair.
Yes, we're from a different generation fighting for free speech.
It was problematic because it made people uncomfortable because maybe there was gay sex.
So in that time, it was bad because of Christian conservatives,
I guess. And also just
it's funny
people
how that
who
comes around.
Desire not to rock the boat. I don't want to do anything that could be viewed as controversial, because if it's controversial, it's bad or it's not as good as it should be.
And that's what you
think. Should be clean. No, this is the attitude I got.
Yeah, well, that attitude's actually rather prevalent these days. And it's an understandable attitude to an extent, because I mean, for how many decades have they said that our power is in our wallet? And suddenly we figured out how to use it, and it's being called cancel culture. But on the other hand, like on the other side of that, both of us grew up with real cancel culture, like 2 Live Crew got canceled. Fucking D&D they tried to cancel D&D. Heavy metal.
And now Disney owns D&D.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is the evil mouse empire. So, I mean, it kind of makes sense that the actual living devil would incarnate would try to buy the thing that they thought the devil back in the 1980s. That was the worst sentence of all time. But I think it kind of made sense to the perpetually confused.
I am perpetually confused.
Yeah, I'm going to end that with perpetually confused.
And I just can't stop thinking about the best metal band.
What's the best metal band?
Metalocalypse. or specifically Death Clock, the band in Metal Alchemist.
Yeah, okay. And now
Brendan
for
Small
something
can really
completely
play guitar.
different. And so we're back with a new season
I
of Big and
honestly think a
Surly.
cartoon band is the best metal band I've
It
ever
is
heard.
pretty fucking funny. But I mean, they're basically the Spinal Tap of this generation.
I guess.
They totally are.
They genuinely shred.
So did Spinal Tap.
Grandpa's guitars.
Oh, Grandpa's
guitars. And I do cocaine.
I actually haven't watched any, except
It's
that
brilliant.
what Steve made me watch. Steve
It
is a
is
friend of
brilliant.
ours, a mutual friend. So anyway, this is a really fascinating conversation between me, you, and anybody else who's a super nerd. But this is, what season are we on right now? We took a hiatus
I guess this would be
because
2.
both of us are assholes. But we're back now. So season 2. And we're going to be doing something a little different with this moving forward with the seasons. We're going to be having topics that we're going to try to focus on. And both of us between both of us, we have both Asperger's and I'm guessing adult ADD or ADHD. So staying on topic will prove to be a challenge, but we will try. And we are interested in your feedback. If you got anything, questions you want to ask us or like to bring up your opinion, we'd love to hear from you. Anyway, this season is going to be about an idea, and that idea is why mobilization and general strikes are the political voice of the voiceless in our quotation, to make that as boringly fucking predictable as possible, democracies. So why do we need to have mobilization and general strikes? Why is that really the only political voice, arguably, that the lower class and middle class possess at that moment, is where I'm coming from. I'm not sure about Alex, and we'd love to hear from you.
I am torn. I think that
I can believe that
shows like this, given that we are howling into the void that is YouTube, and 7 people or 7 million people might see this, who knows? And honestly, I really don't care. I hope 7 million people don't see this because I don't want to be recognized on the street. And
I'm a hermit, so it doesn't bother me.
The thing I come down on is, why doesn't the power structure that exists recognizing the impending reality that you're talking about?
And because historically,
we are rapidly running towards widespread civil disobedience again. Mm-hmm. And that's not a good thing for a society to have happen. That's a suboptimal outcome. But it's the direct result of the direction we've been going as a society. Mm-hmm. And that sucks.
It's also predictable. If it's I mean, historic, what was it? Is it Oscar Wilde who said it, or was it the fellow who wrote Oliver Twist? History doesn't repeat, but it can carry a tune.
We're sitting in front of thinking machines.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, the idea is that, like, in pretty much, if you look at the history of discontent, for most of history, it actually really wasn't a problem. I mean, most times it was a small group of people who could be dealt with fairly easily. It wasn't really up until the 1800s that civil disobedience and public discontent were able to actually have effects in real politics, because of the sheer number of people concentrated due to the Industrial Revolution and the poverty that created and was exploited ruthlessly at that time.
History never repeats itself, but it rhymes.
That's what
attributed
it is.
To Mark Twain.
Thank you. I couldn't remember the end of it, but that carries a tune in my ears, I think, a Terry Pratchett quote. I'm so bad at that sort of stuff. Like I remember bits of it and I remember other bits of it, but I can't put it together sometimes.
Man, I swore to myself I would be good and I wouldn't smoke on these anymore.
Well, then
But
don't.
I'm going to break that. I
Why?
don't care because I desperately want a cigarette.
All right. So, I mean, what
I'm
does
so disappointed
mobilization
in
like
myself.
look like? And this is kind of like the problem is everybody is knows that there's problems, but nobody really has any idea of what solutions might be, right? So, I mean, what
I
we
don't
need
think
to,
that's even true. There are lots of people that have solutions, but they're labeled as left wing crazies.
hmm. Well, and that's a really good point. There are things like the circular economy idea out there. Anything that can't be fully reused, recycled, etc., is just literally cut out of the economy. Um, yeah, there is a lot of ideas out there, but the difficulty is getting those ideas accepted, right? You have a homeostatic system like the media that actually excludes ideas that are too fringe for it to understand or want to a degree, report on. Or you've got literally problematic press like CNN who are making shit up whole cloth and Fox that are making up shit whole cloth to push actual agendas, right?
CNN's being a pro corporate agenda, Fox's being a pro fascist. I don't know.
I think they're just literally just pro fucking small government disinformation. I don't know. They're owned by the Saudi Arabians from my understanding. So I mean, what agenda would the Saudi Arabians want to be pushing? Would be the question I ask.
Use oil.
That would definitely be part of it. And by hook or by crook, they're definitely been driving the oil movements. I mean, the Middle East has actually stated that they will not be that they see oil use going into the far future, that we're not getting out of it. And from my understanding, we've actually already slated enough oil usage in the future to blow past anything that's going to keep people safe.
As far as climate change is concerned.
Well,
Because
yeah.
that's a whole nother level and wrinkle to this problem is that the reason why governments need to take action and do something sensible in relation to the standard of living that their population experiences so that they don't rise up is because you don't want to have to deal with the situation like New Orleans had with Katrina all over the country. You don't want to have people rising up alongside a
What
natural
happened in New
disaster.
Orleans? See, this is why don't you refresh the audience on that?
Poor people were left en masse in the city. There was
Hmm.
looting, there was rioting, people were shot, people were killed. There were private security operators running around the city shooting people.
Okay, I see. I didn't know any. Well, I didn't know
Yeah,
some of this. I knew that there had been like a bit of looting and stuff, and
the
that
whole
I think the
city. Well, the
National
city
Guard got
effectively
called in
flooded.
or something,
Yeah,
and like George Bush refused aid, and there was people starving and unable to get fresh water and stuff, and probably a lot of illness because of flooding of sewage and whatnot.
yeah. I mean, we could do a whole episode on just what actually happened with Katrina, but
Yeah, but that's enough to
um,
get people caught up.
that and just Google and you'll find out. Like,
Mm.
I'm always struck by how a little bit of time reframes things. Like, you
Mm.
may have seen this summer reports of a protester shooting up the place at one of the protests in Oregon. And it turns out that was a neo Nazi.
Oh,
Just like it turned out that some of the people in Toronto were police
Oh,
running around.
we have a product issue here in Canada. I mean, they've been caught in Quebec as well. I think I know of at least two instances off the top of my head with Montreal cops trying to incite violence. One's time trying to incite violence, and another time brutally hurting somebody who recognized them as a cop.
But anytime we rise up as a people, we are giving the powers that be and the people that are willing to do anything for money the opportunity to create those situations.
Oh, and they will. They want to. I mean, division is how the culture war works. I mean, if you look at what is it, America, in terms of propaganda after World War II, you had the McCarthyism period where it was the hunt for the Red Scare, wasn't it? And I mean, that was
Yes,
roughly
McCarthyism
paralleled up here. And from that period, the hippies became bad guys. And in the 70s, it was the Cold War was still ongoing. But once that ability to freak out the population by a Cold War died out, like the fall of the Berlin Wall and the death of the USSR, meant that neoliberalism essentially won the argument. So when America no longer had an enemy, it created one, and that was where the origin of the culture war.
And then the Republican Party weaponized that in the form of making
Christian
abortion
activism and stuff,
an
right-wing
issue.
activism.
Yeah.
So I mean, and this is the ideas, not to focus primarily as on left versus right, because in my mind, a lot of that stuff is a very fictional idea. Like right and left are economic viewpoints from an ideology that was written in the 1700s, 1800s, and 1900s primarily. And we have to understand that economics as a philosophy got us into this mess. It was politicized and weaponized. And once the Berlin Wall fell, the labor movement started dying. Like, that's really when the biggest that it was from that period in the 1970s when we switched over to neoliberalism, which is also known as trickle down economics, which is also known as the Chicago School of Economics, supply side economics. It's basically give the rich all the money and everybody will be okay, which has obviously turned into complete and utter bullshit. But that period from the 1970s, then the fall of America with the beginning of the culture war, to the 2008 crash, and followed by a zombie period where nothing has really changed in economics except more and more and more money goes to the upper class. So I mean, you can picture it from 1970s money going to the upper class like this, and then it just goes exponential, and then ending in this period with the largest wealth transfer to the upper class in history under the guise of COVID-19 management or mismanagement, as is very easily arguable in a lot of cases.
1.3 million US homes
What's that?
make more than $500,000 a year.
Yeah.
And they are the 1%.
Yeah.
And they own as much as everyone else.
Yep.
We are a nation of more than 300 million. I have no idea. 300 billion. 300 million.
I think it's around 360 million.
Is it now?
The
Okay.
number
I
I
don't
thought I
know
saw
how much.
recently.
Last time I saw it was 320 or 332.
What I mean, that's obscene, right? Like that sort of wealth disparity is like we are now back to, we don't really have a middle class left with that sort of wealth disparity. So I mean, what we've seen from the 1970s forward was not just the gradual destruction of labor rights, the use of free trade to honestly make products cheaper in foreign countries actually had devastating effects on local labor and local pay rates. So we've ended up with I think, effectively the middle class being gutted and the lower class becoming the dominant class of civilization once again, as in looking much like the 1930s and earlier these days.
It is a shit show.
It's really bad.
We're digging holes. We're getting dark.
Oh, it goes in very dark directions when stuff like this happens. And I mean, when you look at it, there's nowhere in the United States where somebody making what are the numbers? I'm just going to look them up here. Nobody can afford a 2-bedroom apartment by themselves, really. Here we go. What is the average cost?
I can't.
Nobody can. So, I mean, looking at these statistics here, which comes from, oh, who is this again? A 29th. All right. Well, we'll get to who it's from later. It's the largest what you
Go
need,
ahead.
2-bedroom housing wage. To afford a 2-bedroom apartment, you need to make $24.90 an hour. 1-bedroom is $20.40 an hour. The average wage of secretaries and administrative assistants is $20.22 an hour. Motor vehicle operators, $20.02. Financial clerks, $19.51. And the numbers just go down from there with food and beverage serving workers at around $12.95 to $11.87. So, I mean, this shows that basically nobody in America can afford to do anything. And these numbers are very similar up in Canada, actually. We have our own housing crisis and affordability crisis going on here. And then we have another figure from this. So this is from the Economic Policy Institute States of Working America Data Library 2020, adjusted for 2021 dollars. So the 70th percentile can afford about $30.45 an hour. The 10th percentile can afford about $11.17 an hour. And a 1-bedroom apartment, as we've said those numbers before, is around $20 an hour and then $25 an hour for a 2-bedroom. So this effectively locks out the bottom 40th percentile from even renting a 1-bedroom apartment to themselves. So that's 40% of Americans can't afford a 1-bedroom apartment to themselves. So those are relatively bleak numbers, right? Yeah, so this is from the Out of Reach 2021 National Low Income Housing Coalition, and this stuff can be found on their website. And yeah, with wages insufficient to pay for modest rental housing, even when individuals work full-time year-round, a brief furlong or loss of hours such as we've seen over the past year can create debts that renters can never repay. And these are things that we're seeing ongoing. Extremely low income renters must compete with all higher income households for the limited number of rental homes affordable to them in the private market. Now, what this means is that the bottom 40th percentile have to compete with everybody else for things that they can afford. So that somebody from a higher percentile might decide that they're going to take a lower costed house, they remove it from the market of that lower percentile. So the housing crisis for the bottom 40% of Americans, and whatever percentage that is of Canadians, are facing a serious housing source risk right now. So that's one reason why, I mean, people need to figure out how to get their wages back up, right?
Well, and looking at the minimum wage hasn't been risen since 2009. in the
Yeah.
US.
And what is it,
Raised
like
since 2009.
725? How much
Yeah.
is it?
Yeah. Which is a joke.
Yeah. So
I
yeah,
think California is $14 an hour.
which is still insufficient.
Yes. It is literally the minimum wage, and it's double what the federal standard is.
And the argument has always been that, I mean, if you raise the minimum wage to be a living wage, whatever that is in your particular region, it varies. In my province of Newfoundland and Labrador, it's estimated to be something like $16 an hour, whereas in some provinces, I've heard it's anywhere up to $28 an hour, is really like the bare minimum just to survive without losing your fucking mind to stress and wondering if you're going to be on the street because of some unexpected bill. Like, the argument that the minimum wage is impossible to raise has been like what's the term for a whipping horse, whipping stick? Do you know?
No.
It's been a really common thing for economists and like people who do not want to raise the minimum wage to bring up, is that if you raise the minimum wage, that the cost of living goes up for everybody. Things will be more expensive, jobs will disappear. And you actually sent me something on how this was proven false this year by that Nobel Prize economist, right? Do you remember what he said?
Yeah, the winners for the Nobel Prize for Economic Sciences in 2021 were David Card, Joshua Angrist, and Guido Imbens.
One of them a Canadian, as our press was quick to point out and pontificate about endlessly for a week or two.
And what Card did was he analyzed the labor market effects of minimum wages, immigration, and education. And his studies found that the minimum wage does not lead to fewer jobs, that immigrants don't necessarily lower the incomes of a person born in the country, but may negatively affect the wages of other immigrants, and that resources spent in schools have a huge effect on future labor market success of students.
Would you repeat that third one? I didn't quite catch it.
That money spent in schools has a very sizable effect as far as affecting positively or negatively with the absence or presence of spending in schools affecting a student's future labor market success.
That makes sense.
Yeah, you put money into schools, you get better educated students, they go on and are more successful and make more money.
So the question
unless
would be,
they're a
why?
schmuck like me and get an English degree.
And see, this is the problem, is that we don't appreciate all education at this point anymore. I mean,
no, a bachelor's degree qualifies me to work for what I would argue are poverty wages, though are not poverty wages by the federal standard, but the federal standard for poverty wages were,
but you're
let's
not
see, the
alone
last
in
time it
this.
was.
The thing is a lot of degrees lead to this right now. This is the value on all education has decreased over time. Not because of market saturation either, but just because of how the labor rights were destroyed over decades under neoliberalism since the 70s. So, I mean, your poverty wages as what you can teach is similar to many people. I mean, 5% of the population is a professional, from my understanding. And of those, like, even in some of the professions like nursing, wages are garbage. They're treated like garbage. Even in the professions where you make decent money, you're usually treated like a piece of shit, like law and business and finance, right? Where there's a lot of like abuse and verbal abuse expected, high levels of competition, stuff like that. So what are you looking at the moment?
Just poverty rates and when the last time it was raised, and it's all over the place. So
Oh, it's a
that's
big topic.
further room to research. I should have had those numbers locked and loaded.
Well, I mean, this is season one of this is this is the beginning of this topic. The reason we're going to be making these topics around having an core idea and then discussing it over a number of episodes is because they're such big ideas, and there's going to be a lot of meandering because they're also very complex ideas where a number of variables actually interact to cause the problem. So it's like a lot of people like to think A causes B and B causes C, a linear chain of events. And that really just doesn't make sense, even though that's our basic idea of how science tests things is take something small, change one little thing, see what happens. But in reality, that ignores how vastly complex things are. You don't have one cause, you have like a near infinite number of causes that the smaller, closer in you get, the more fine-tuned you can make it, the farther out you go, the more intersecting variables you're capable of seeing, each as complex as the variable you just pulled out from, touching all intersecting on this one object, be it an individual, be it an object in space, be it an atom, and then it's spreading out that from there. So I mean, multiply that by the number of atoms in the universe.
I love that. I think we leave it there for episode 1.
Yeah.
If your mind isn't blown, you should probably be less sober for episode 2.
How I see the world.
Me too, man. It's always big picture first, which has its benefits and its drawbacks. All right, I've been Big.
I've been Surly, I think.
Thank you for watching.
Remember, click the like and share.
Oh shit, I already hit stop.
And have a good one.